And so the brain is actually wired to make us lazy. You and I, we voluntarily go out for a run, but our brain is saying, hey, wait a second, you don't really have to do this. But fortunately for us, the brain has evolved more advanced brain regions that can override that lazy discussion.
여러분 안녕하십니까? 돌콩입니다. 여러분들 운동 제대로 잘 하고 계십니까? 저 같은 경우에는 러닝이랑 요가를 그래도 좀 규칙적으로 해보려고 노력을 하는 편인데 하고 나면 너무나 좋다는 걸 알면서도 하러 가기까지 그 운동을 시작하기까지 정말 제 자신과 지난한 싸움을 하게 되거든요. 그러다 보니까 어떻게 하면 운동을 하러 가기까지의 그 과정을 조금 더 수월하게 만들 수 있을까? 나의 게으름을 어떻게 하면 좀 더 쉽게 물리칠 수 있을까에 관한 고민을 굉장히 저도 오랫동안 했던 것 같습니다. 제 서재에 책등을 이렇게 잘 보이게끔 꽂아놓은 책들이 몇 권이 있는데 그 중에 한 권의 책이 이런 책이 있습니다. Move the body, heal the mind. 이렇게 딱 꽂아놓으면은 책등에 이렇게 제목이 딱 보이잖아요. 그래서 기분이 좀 좋지 않고 의욕이 없어서 운동을 하러 가기 싫을 때 이 책의 등을 이렇게 딱 보면은 아, 빨리 그래도 몸을 움직여야지 기분이 좋아지겠구나 라는 생각이 들어서 어떻게든 나가게 돼요. 이 책이 이번에 한국에 운동의 뇌과학이라는 제목으로 번역이 나온다고 해서 제니퍼 헤이스 선생님 이 책을 쓰신 박사님을 직접 채널에 모실 수 있게 됐습니다. 그래서 당장 물어봤습니다. 교수님 저는 왜 이렇게 게으를까요? 그 질문부터 당장 여쭤봤고요. 이 책을 쓰신 제니퍼 헤이스 선생님은 뇌과학자이시기도 하시지만 캐나다 맥마스터 대학교에서 키네지올로지 그러니까 운동학 교수님으로 계시거든요. 그리고 뉴로핏 연구소의 디렉터로도 계시니까 이 분야의 전문가라고 할 수 있겠죠. 그래서 이 책을 읽어보시면 저 같은 경우에는 칼로리를 태우겠다는 목적으로 운동을 많이 하지만 그 외에도 운동을 할 때 우리의 몸과 마음에 어떤 놀라운 일들이 일어나는지에 대한 과학적인 이해도 할 수 있고요. 그뿐만이 아니라 이제 제니퍼 선생님의 개인적인 어려움들, 삶에서의 문제들 그런 것들을 경험하실 때 운동이 본인에게 어떤 영향을 주었고 그로 인해서 어떻게 그런 문제들을 이겨내실 수 있었는지에 대한 이야기를 굉장히 진솔하게 나눠주고 계세요. 그래서 읽고 나면은 운동에 대한 과학적인 이해뿐만이 아니라 어떤 정서적인 교감도 느낄 수 있는 그런 책입니다. 한편으로는 이 책이 되게 실용적이기도 한 게 챕터 끝에 선생님이 직접 짜놓으신 그 운동 매뉴얼들도 들어가 있습니다. 그래서 수면의 질을 개선하고 싶을 때, 뇌를 젊게 유지하고 싶을 때, 머리를 맑게 하고 일을 더 잘하고 공부를 더 잘하고 싶을 때 해야 하는 운동 매뉴얼들, 불안감, 우울, 스트레스로 시달릴 때 할 수 있는 운동 매뉴얼들 이런 것들이 굉장히 디테일하게 나와 있어서 실질적으로 도움을 받을 수 있는 부분도 많습니다. 운동이 좋은 건 알지만 본인의 게으름과 매일매일 싸우고 계신 분들 혹은 운동을 하고는 싶은데 어디서부터 시작을 해야 할지 몰라서 망설이고 계시는 분들 오늘의 인터뷰가 도움이 됐으면 좋겠네요. It was really good to see you. I really liked your book.
Okay.
And I checked this morning actually on the online bookstore and it got that bestseller badge. Shiny.
Really?
Yeah. A good way to start this conversation. I really wanted to talk about why we are so lazy. I am a runner and I like running, but I like running when I finished. I like the idea of running, but it never got really easy to lace up and go out. And it just takes a lot of conversation with myself, you know, why I need to do this right now and why, you know, this is good for me in the long term. You are a neuroscientist, so I want to learn from the neuroscientist why the exercise never gets easier.
Yes, this is like the $1,000,000 question, right? And I feel the same way as you. It never seems to get easier. And the reason why is actually like, if we think about the time when our brain evolved, it actually evolved to be very conservative of energy. And so it's not lazy per se, but very energy conservative. And so if you think back to when early humans were around, we had to expend a lot of energy to hunt and gather our food. And so when we weren't moving to survive, it was really important that we conserve that energy that we had. And so the brain is actually wired to make us lazy when we don't need to move to survive. And so flash forward to today, modern day life, there's so many conveniences that we don't really have to move to survive anymore. You and I, we voluntarily go out for a run, but our brain is saying, hey, wait a second, you don't really have to do this. But fortunately for us, the brain has evolved more advanced brain regions that can override that lazy discussion. And this includes the prefrontal cortex, which can remind the lazy brain, this is going to make us feel good. This is good for our health, for our well-being. And once we start moving, there's this beautiful thing that happens where the muscles start to release these myokines and the brain starts to be infused with neurochemicals that help to reinforce the activity and make us feel good.
In your book, you said that you were not very sporty kid when you were young, but you did amazing thing. You did triathlon, you cycle, you run. Can I ask, what is your self-talk when you don't really want to start doing the exercise, but when you really have to do it?
This is really a good point. So when I was younger, I wasn't really into sports, and I still, sports are not necessarily my thing, but I do like to exercise on my own now. And we think, okay, after work or by the end of the day, I'll get in my exercise. But then you get there never seems to be enough time. And one thing I find is that I make a plan ahead of time. And this takes all the thinking out of it, all the willpower you need to come up with the plan to get before you even get moving. You include details like what you'll do, where, when, with whom, and then you put that in your calendar so that when the appointment shows up, you know exactly what you're doing. You just have to put on your workout clothes and go. So it helps to reduce some of those barriers that can get in the way from exercising. Exercise is my medicine. And so I know even if I don't want to do it, if I don't get it in today, I'm not going to feel good tomorrow. And so I know that to be true, and that really creates a great motivation for me.
Speaking of which, I think this is a great place to talk about what exercise can do to us. I know that it burns a calorie, so people do exercise a lot to burn their calorie and for weight management, and I think that's really big. But that is not it, right? So what else can exercise do too?
Yeah, so exercise can do some really amazing things for the health of the mind and the brain. So it reduces anxiety, it can reduce depressive moods, it can boost creativity and focus, it can improve your sleep, a whole range of things that it can do for the mind to really make you think sharper and feel better.
Can it be replaced by something else? Because, if you think about exercise as a way to burn the calorie, one logic that people come up with a lot is that I will eat less. I'm not going to exercise because I hate it so much. But what you're saying is that exercise does more than, burning the calorie, and then that cannot be replaced by eating less.
Yeah, that's right. It's working through completely different mechanisms. So you're absolutely right. When it comes to weight management, you can choose. You need to control your diet, and you could add exercise. It's sort of an additional thing that you could do for weight management. But when it comes to all these other benefits, you can't really put exercise into a pill. We haven't figured that out yet. And the reason why is because it does so many different things to the body. So for example, when it comes to protecting the brain from trauma and stress, one molecule that is increased with exercise is called neuropeptide Y. And neuropeptide Y is thought to protect the brain from trauma. So that's just one of the many molecules. So exercise also helps to regulate inflammation. Now, we typically think about inflammation associated with our immune response and protection against viruses and bacteria. But the immune system also impacts our mood. And there's a direct relationship between chronic stress or having a really stressful life and the impact that has on the body. So when we are chronically stressed, what happens is it begins to damage the cells of the body, increasing an immune response where the immune cells actually start to attack those damaged cells, increasing inflammation, which can get into the brain and start disrupting the brain processes that regulate our mood. And this can actually be a source of depression for some people. And in particular, there's a link between high levels of inflammation and depressive disorders that don't respond to the typical antidepressant drugs. So about 1 in 3 people are thought to not respond to antidepressant drugs. They take them, but their mood is still very low. And for these individuals, they seem to respond better to exercise. So that's not to say that antidepressants don't have a place. Of course they do. But this is just to say that exercise could be another tool in the toolbox when we're dealing with our depressive mood.
Could we talk a little more about intellectual performance and exercise, like memory or thinking or deep thinking and attention, focus, and creativity too?
The first thing that we have to realize is that when we sit for long periods of time, this can cause a reduction in the blood-brain flow. And this makes it difficult for us to focus. So you can imagine you're sitting there working all day in front of a computer, probably looking at a screen, and that prolonged sitting for 4 or more hours causes a reduction in the oxygenated blood flow to the brain, especially in the front, the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is really important because it governs a lot of our brain processes, the complex stuff we need for thinking and memory. When we take these stand-up breaks or we do a stand-up meeting, what happens is that counteracts the reduced blood flow. So the blood is restored, the oxygen is restored to the brain. It helps to keep the brain cells firing optimally. Research shows that every 30 minutes, if you stand up for a 2-minute self-paced walking break or movement break, this is enough to counteract the reduced brain blood flow from prolonged sitting. You don't have to go out for a run for that. You just have to, stand up and move around. But when we do go out for a run or we go out for a walk, what happens is that more of that blood flow rushes into the prefrontal cortex, and that creates an even greater boost that can last hours after the exercise. One really amazing thing that exercise has been shown to do is help promote the birth of brand new brain cells within the brain. And this becomes especially important as we get older, when our brain cells, they don't proliferate as quickly as they used to when we were younger. And so exercise gives that boost to proliferation and helps keep our brain healthy and more in a youthful state. It's like anti-aging for the brain in a way, where exercise helps keep the brain young by stimulating neuroplasticity so that it can withstand the damage that can accumulate with aging, and can help prevent things like dementia.
Now we talked about why we have to exercise. I want to talk about what, how much, so on and so forth about exercise. I mean, there are a lot of things that we could do. We could do weight training, we could run, we could do yoga, Pilates, Peloton. There are so many things that we can do. What do you think is the most important thing when we try to choose what kind of exercise we do?
Well, I think the most important thing is choosing something that you like to do, that you're going to consistently do for the rest of your life. Because that's it. We need to be doing something, regularly, consistently to get those brain health benefits. Because it's really each bout, each session, each workout, we need to stimulate the muscles, get the blood flowing, stimulate the heart, stimulate the lungs. And all of this gives the brain what it needs to thrive. So there has been research done to look at the different benefits you get from aerobic versus resistance exercise, for example. So aerobic exercise could be walking, jogging, swimming, cycling. And when it comes to things like depression, for example, it seems like some activity is better than none. So any kind of movement you get, and this is true for a lot of mental function. So 10-minute bouts or more seems to be enough. Research shows that after a 10-minute walk, you have reduced anxiety, you have an improve in mood, you have a boost in creativity. When it comes to reducing depressive symptoms in particular, there's been some research showing sort of looking at whether duration or intensity matter most. And when it comes to aerobic exercise, it suggests that intensity matters less than the duration when it comes to depressive mood. So for 10 minutes of movement, you reduce your depressive symptoms. And then every additional 10 minutes more you reduce your symptoms even more, up to 1 hour. Now, when it comes to resistance exercise, the research shows that it's more about intensity. So, for example, in this comparison, they looked at things like yoga and Tai Chi versus sort of resistance exercises with heavier weights. And they found it was the resistance exercises that included higher intensity weights that was most beneficial.
Your book talks a lot about what exercise does to our mind and how it heals our minds. But I think, including myself, million people, hopefully, who are watching this video will be curious what is the most effective for losing weight.
You're right. In my book, each chapter I have a workout session for the week that will target the specific area, whether it's anxiety, depression, sleep, creativity and focus, even memory and healthy aging. I think a lot of us may turn to exercise for weight loss, right? When we want to lose weight, it does really have a lot to do with sort of the balance of calories in versus calories out. And exercise can certainly help with that. But it really is all of these additional benefits that exercise gives. And so I'd like to challenge people to see exercise more as like this holistic form of medicine.
It was really good to actually read your story, especially I really like the swimming part of your story. So you, as a kid, you kind of got to not like swimming because of some experience. I want readers to actually read it. When you are doing the triathlon, you had to go back to the pool and you had to talk to yourself all over again to not back up. And that was a really good story. And I was thinking about my experience too. During the COVID, my mental health was not really great. My drinking habit went crazy. I needed something, but gym was closed. My yoga studio was closed, and I just didn't know what to do, right? And then I decided to run, and running was the most hateful exercise I ever experienced in my life. I was not a runner, so running just didn't make sense to me. I can walk and I can stop anytime. Why do I have to run? Was the narrative that I have. But just looking 6 months ahead, I signed up for one, I think it was a 5K event, 10K event. I signed up for that and I started training. And after running that 10K, I was not just the same me with the experience of finishing 10K. I was a different person, I could say. It was a transformative experience for me. It was beautiful. So I think that experience, that kind of feeling, that good feeling really keeps you going. And I think that's the ultimate motivator, that I can keep doing the exercise, which is hard and which never gets easier probably.
Yeah. And it's like a metaphor for life, right? Life can be hard.
That's true, yes.
And your exercise is hard, but you do it, and you do it consistently. And you achieve these amazing things like running a 10K, which you never thought you would do, right? And me doing a triathlon, which I never thought I would do. You surprise yourself, and it gives you this like confidence that you can do anything, that you could achieve all of your goals in sport or outside in life.
So I want to talk a little bit more about what exercise cannot do when it comes to depression, anxiety, weight management. Exercise is a good first step to take, and hopefully it gets better by doing that. But how do we know this is not the exercise problem, I should go see the doctor?
It's a good important message to say that exercise is not a cure-all, but it does help. If you're struggling, often it's best to go see a doctor to talk about the situation. And exercise can be used as an add-on therapy there that can help reduce the dosage that you might have to take and some of the side effects.
I talked with Dr. Anna Lemke, the author of Dopamine Nation, I think several months ago, and then she was mentioning exercise, a way to get good dopamine, and that lasts for a while. One comment that I got for that video was that someone was curious about whether it is possible to be addicted to exercise. Can you talk a little bit more about exercise addiction, if there is such a thing actually?
Well, there is, but it's sometimes or often mixed up with eating disorders. When we talk about weight management, someone with an eating disorder may over-exercise as a way of punishing themselves for eating. So in that case, it's not a true addiction per se, but more of a disordered eating response. And so it is possible to be addicted to exercise because, like you said, it does increase dopamine, but generally it's increasing dopamine to natural levels. So if we compare that to drugs of abuse, nicotine, alcohol, cocaine, all of these drugs of abuse increase dopamine to supernatural levels. And this is what creates the addiction cycle. So it increases dopamine to levels that the brain was never meant to handle. The brain responds by stripping away some of those dopamine receptors to create more of a balance. But now what happens is, because you don't have those receptors, that the naturally rewarding things are more difficult to find joy from. And so you need the drug to feel good. And this creates a tolerance. So with exercise, because it's increasing it to natural levels, it's possible to become addicted, but it's really difficult. So if we think about exercise, it is a physical stress for the body. If we do it chronically, the body will wear down and it will become injured, and then we can't exercise. It's like a protective mechanism. But when we use exercise in sort of these acute short bursts, like one workout, take a rest, one workout, take a rest. So the exercise activates the body and the mind. The rest period allows it to come back down to baseline. And then we activate it again with the next workout. And then we rest and recover. And then we activate. And this repeated activation, that's what's strengthening the body. It's strengthening many systems of the body, including the stress response, so that it becomes stronger and fitter, and you can lift heavier loads, you can run longer, and you can run faster. And so this adaptive process requires rest.
I want to talk a little more about eating disorder and exercise, if that's okay. So I remember when I was in grad school, food or eating activity itself was the pleasure that I can easily pursue. I was waiting for my lunchtime all the time. My lunch was at 11:30 in school cafeteria, and it was like all you can eat based cafeteria. So I could eat a lot of things like pizza, cookie, or whatever. So that was like when I'm happy. That's my happy place. And then after that, I'll have to go back to my dark office and then start working on my dissertation. It was not very pleasant. But of course, I know that my life is a super sedentary and I just ate a lot of things. So I knew that I had to burn this calories somehow. So I will go to the gym after like 5 p.m. And then we'll do exercise very hard. And I think I spent like almost 2 hours every day to do the exercise. If I spent some of that time for my dissertation, I could have graduated a lot earlier probably. Like after that exercise, like I get exhausted and I'm thinking about eating more food, right? So it was a vicious cycle. You overeat, you over-exercise, you overeat again. So you couldn't really get out of that. That kind of got resolved as I graduated, I think, and the life changed a little bit after that. But when I was in that trap, it was super hard to get out of it. I knew that this is not healthy. I could decrease the amount of exercise, and I knew that that's fine. And then I'm eating a lot more than I needed probably. So I wanted to change that. But once I fell in that trap, it was really, it looked impossible to get out of there. How can we gain that balance and joy of eating or eating and exercise, let's say, once that balance collapsed?
Yeah, sometimes when it collapses, it's just really important to get additional help and support because, like you said, you get in sort of this vicious cycle, and a lot of people who are in that cycle may not even realize they're in it until they just don't really know how to stop it. And so definitely reaching out to professionals, they can really provide a lot of help. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to quit exercising. It just means you need a different relationship with it. And a lot of therapists and coaches can help create that. And one thing that I find that I have to do is I work with a coach, actually, because I find if I don't, I either go do too little or I do way too much, and I'm never in the middle. And so just knowing this about myself, I just need to have somebody regulate that for me. And so I follow the plan. I don't go more, I don't go less. Well, sometimes I go less, but not too much less. I think for me, especially like you, it's important to have that sort of those checks and balances from an external source of a person who can, help us with some of our behaviors that might, have these tendencies.
Last question will be your comments for the Korean readers. If there is anything you want to share with the Korean people, that would be great, but especially for those people who know that exercise is really good, but who are struggling to take a first step.
Yeah, I think it's important to know that you're not alone, that everybody's starting at their own point, and don't compare your journey with anybody else's, right? I think you know where you want to be mentally and physically, and every step you take is moving you in that right direction. So don't undervalue even small amounts of movement that seem maybe incidental. They can have a really big impact on breaking that inertia and getting you moving down the right path.